Hello, my fellow sisters. It's an honor to be invited to share a few thoughts with you. I have followed Mormon Women for ethical government for a long time. I have loved watching your grassroots advocacy on so many issues involving women of our faith and others to make a difference in the world. My initial invitation was to be on a panel with some of my dear refugee friends and community leaders, but things change on a daily basis in this new situation we find ourselves in. This is a unique time. The fact that we are not sitting in the same room enjoying each other's camaraderie demonstrates that a small, invisible enemy can keep nations and principalities on their knees. My desire is that my message will not only bring hope, but also a call to action to make a difference for refugees and the most vulnerable among us. It's been a roller coaster week in Salt Lake. Not only have we been struggling to stop this invisible enemy known as COVID-19, we also had an earthquake. This sent the anxiety already at an all-time high through the roof for many. As the director of a small nonprofit called Utah Refugee Connection, I was already keenly aware of the stewardship of donations and resources we receive to help local refugees. Utah Refugee Connection was set up to fill gaps in services in the refugee community along the Wasatch Front. This week, I felt the exponential challenge of figuring out how and where these things should go, while also limiting the spread of COVID-19. Luckily, I'm a creative person by nature, and we've used some pretty creative ways to get things done. During the holidays, our share house, which we operate in partnership with Granite School District, was inundated with generous donors and Eagle Scouts scrambling to finish their projects. We kind of laughed about it at the time, but we had over 80 Eagle Scouts come to us in the last few months of the year to get things done. We also have a social media feed called Serve Refugees on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We have several thousand people who follow our feed and generously support our efforts. To say our share house was insane from November to January is no understatement. I now understand that God was doing things and preparing for things that I could not foresee. I love this quote by Michael Lewis. Above all, recognize that if you have had success, you have also had luck. And with luck comes obligation. You owe a debt, and not just to your gods, you owe a debt to the unlucky. This quote reminds me of a common hymn that we sing in our congregations. It has new meaning given what the last 2 weeks have brought into the lives of many of us. I wish I had a beautiful singing voice or musical number to share, but as I read these words, think about what they mean to you right now in this place and time that we find ourselves in. Because I have been given much, I too must give. Because of my great bounty, Lord, each day I live. I shall divide my gifts from thee with every brother that I see who has the need of help from me. Because I have been sheltered, fed by thy good care, I cannot see another's lack and I not share. My glowing fire, my loaf of bread, my roof safe shelter overhead, that he too may be comforted. Because I have been blessed by thy great love, dear Lord, I'll share thy love again according to thy word. I shall give love to those in need. I'll show that love by word and deed. Thus shall my thanks be thanks indeed. Which leads me back to that quote by Michael Lewis, a writer and financial journalist. Above all, recognize that if you have had success, you have also had luck. And with luck comes obligation. You owe a debt, and not just to your gods, you owe a debt to the unlucky. We are all lucky. Most of us have not known life-threatening persecution because of who we are or what we believe, or ongoing days of hunger and walking. We have not begged for our lives, seen family members burned or raped in front of us. Most of us have been born into relative comfort and have had great success and luck. which means we owe a debt to our God and the unlucky. Refugees, unfortunately, are some of the most unlucky people I know. Their lives are inexplicably altered just because of where they are born. Right now, we have over 70 million displaced people throughout the world looking for safety and security. It could easily be you or me. 37,000 people are forced to flee their homes every day due to conflict and persecution. In the largest refugee camp of 630,000, people depend on others for help and survival. Of those individuals, only 1% of refugees in refugee camps will ever be resettled in an outside country. 1%. This is a heartbreaking loss of human potential. I believe God wants each of us to become the best we can be. It's difficult to become who you are divinely meant to be when you're not even able to have your basic needs met. What are we doing to advocate for these displaced people? I'm going to share once again. I think it's difficult to become who you are divinely meant to be when you are not even able to have your basic needs met. What are we doing to advocate for these displaced people? It's interesting to look at the data of refugees arriving in the United States over the last several years. Right now, the U.S. is at its lowest number of taking refugees to be resettled here, despite the higher need. We're not even in the top 10 host countries, despite being the richest country in the world with the most refugees. This is what I hope to focus on, but given the current situation, I felt prompted to turn a little bit different direction and talk about some other things. In Utah, over 65,000 refugees are finding their way. One of the greatest gifts I get to see is the gift of watching them over time become more of who they're divinely meant to be. As their basic needs are met and they have access to education and opportunities, so many blossom and become so much more. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of my job. God wants us all to become who we're divinely meant to be. And I believe as we reach out to help others become who they're meant to be, we too become who we are meant to be. One of these people is a girl named Paula. She's a teenage refugee from the Congo. She shared this quote with me from Nelson Mandela. She says, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills yet to climb. My journey so far as a refugee has been nothing short of climbing many hills." She recently gave a talk that I was blessed to hear. Paula was born several months premature in a refugee camp in Botswana. Seeing how small she was and the limited medical care they had to offer, she was thrown in the trash. Fortunately, a woman felt Paula could be saved and took her out and cared for her. Her mother died shortly after her birth. Paula said in her talk, "I was given new life twice, once as an infant and once when I came to the United States. When refugees are allowed to access the United States and other countries, they are able to become so much more. Paula knows what a gift this is and has taken full advantage of the opportunities available to her. Despite being small and sometimes struggling, her basic needs have been met, and now she's on the path of becoming who she is divinely meant to be." She closed her talk saying this, "I have never given up, even when things seem to be tough. Losing my mother was tough for me. As I am preparing myself for the next hill of college, I keep in mind where I came from, what I have been through, and just like Mandela, I have climbed hills and I am prepared to climb many more." She is now a junior at a local high school in Salt Lake City. She has climbed some steep hills. She is determined not to let the hills defeat her. She is well on her way to becoming more of God who God intended her to be. Her story inspires me that I too can face the hills before me. Creativity, intelligence, and ingenuity are universal. Opportunities are not. We need to be better advocates for bringing refugees to our countries, supporting them, and helping them become more of who they were divinely meant to be. It makes me wonder what we're losing as we let refugees remain where they are. Their contributions may be what we need to solve problems we cannot solve for ourselves. Refugees are used to using every possible resource in every possible way. I've seen this among my refugee friends here in Salt Lake. They think outside the box, they value education, they are risk takers. All of these skill sets make them uniquely prepared to solve problems that we might not have the ability to solve. I planned on spending a little more time delving into this topic, but feel like it might be better at this time to share some observations and thoughts of as I have worked on the front lines of meeting the needs of the most vulnerable among us. COVID-19 has sneakily and eerily creeped in, and as an earthquake rocked our world, I saw the best and worst among us. In the preliminary days of the announcement of COVID-19 invisibly invading our state and country, I witnessed the crazy anxiety of people madly buying and stockpiling necessities. I realized that people wanted to be more prepared and wondered what I should be doing to prepare for my family. As cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and diapers were disappearing from the shelves, many vulnerable families were wondering how they could prepare. 2 days later, I had refugee community leaders asking me for help. Refugees who live paycheck to paycheck and have limited resources to buy items were walking around and riding public transport to different stores to get the basic necessities of for their families, only to discover that none of those items were available. Despite my ability to give them grocery cards, they were of no use when individuals could not find many of the staples they needed. One great gift and huge tender mercy was that our share house had taken ample cleaning kits, diapers, and toilet paper during the months before this emergency. We still remain fairly stocked, but know that over the next few weeks these items will dwindle. We have been able to help hundreds of families have items they could not access at stores because so many people over-purchased those items. It made me keenly aware that God knows of these individuals, but relies on us to help meet their basic needs. Our baptismal covenant means so much more than we realize, especially in light of this pandemic. The bearing of one another's burdens does not just apply to our families and fellow church members. It applies to all our fellow men, and I believe especially the vulnerable. Mosiah clearly speaks to us, saying, "As ye are desirous to come unto the fold of God, and be called his people, and are willing to bear one another's burdens that they may be light, yea, and are willing to mourn with those that mourn, yea, and comfort those who stand in need of comfort, and to stand as a witness of God at all times and in all things and in all places, that ye may be even until death." It is a good reminder that God needs us to care for one another. I think we're pretty good at caring for those of us in the same fold, but what of those who have no fold, no network, limited resources, and live in vulnerability? I highly recommend this article written by Jana Reese called "What Kind of People Will Mormons Be in a Global Apocalypse?" It appeared on religionnews.com and the Salt Lake Tribune. She articulates so well what I've been feeling the last few days and what I've seen with members of our faith. Lest the title scares you away, she says, we're trained to think that apocalypse means the end of the world or the end of civilization. But apocalyptic literature, whether it be the Book of Revelations or a zombie movie, has an inexplicably different purpose. The word apocalypse means to reveal. The apocalyptic genre is about revealing, but it's not revealing the future. It's not a crystal ball. It's revealing something that's already true about us. It's revealing things about our culture we don't want to admit. This pandemic is revealing some truths about ourselves, some good, some not so good. I know I'm personally taking stock of what I need to change. Jana says, this is an apocalypse. It will help to reveal who we are individually, and for the Mormon people, how we will respond to this moment will define our identity going forward. So far, some of us are failing on projecting selflessness and concern for our fellow men as we continue to disregard CDC guidelines, to gather in large groups and celebrate mission calls and welcome the return of missionaries coming home from highly hit COVID-19 areas. Memberings gathering in the thousands at the Salt Lake airport to welcome missionaries did not shed a good light on our being part of the solution. It showed a blatant disregard for the safety and well-being of the general community, an elitist attitude that we are somehow an exception. I'm not faulting one person. I think there was a mix of bad choices in a challenging situation. However, it did appear in local and national news with our faith attached to it. How are we responding, especially for the most vulnerable? In her article, she talks about hunkering and bunkering, or tending and befriending. I love these uses of those phrases. Let's talk about hunkering and bunkering. Jana Reese says there's a hunker and bunker mentality. She describes it this way. This mode is characterized by admirable preparation coupled with strident self-congratulations, as we aim to let the whole world know our beloved prophet saw this coming. We aren't a people to be caught with our pantries down. We are a people who saved for a rainy day, who continued canning our own tomatoes during the 80s and the 90s, which was after it was actually necessary before it became artisanally cool. And because our prophet moved us to a year and a half ago to a more home-centered, church-supported model for Christian living, we're better prepared than most to handle the disruption of meeting congregationally for months on end. We have our Come Follow Me curriculum and our reading assignments. After all, so every church member in the world knows which passage of Scripture to study and discuss in a given week. I'm not saying this move wasn't inspired. What she does say is that it's hardly the time to crow about it. If you're a Latter-day Saint who thinks the decision was inspired because the Lord was interested in saving you and your family, full stop. You've entirely missed the point. The point was to save everybody. The point is always to save everybody. This became a problem for me when I started sharing donated gift cards to help refugee families stock up on items they needed. Many of these families live paycheck to paycheck. They did not have the option to stock up beforehand. I got calls saying that many of the items they normally fed their families, like rice, beans, and oatmeal, could not be found. Neither was toilet paper or diapers. It was heartbreaking to hear the stories of refugees walking and taking public transportation on a quest to feed their families and find things. They did not and do not have the luxury that many of us do of driving our car to different stores to find things. My heart was breaking for them. I still struggle as I see my Mormon friends posting their homemade breads and cinnamon rolls on Instagram with homemade jams they have canned during the stay-at-home season, knowing that refugees are struggling to find things on the shelves that they need. Hunker and bunker adequately reflects what I've seen these first few days of the COVID-19 rampage. Again, Jana Reese's statement, if you're a Latter-day Saint who thinks the decision was inspired because the Lord was interested in saving you and your family, full stop. You have entirely missed the point. The point was to save everybody. The point is always to save everybody. Certainly the reason we are asked to store so much is to help others, especially the most vulnerable. I encourage my friends and neighbors to do what they can to help others, including flattening the curve, tending and befriending instead of hunkering and bunkering, taking stock of what they have and what they need, simplifying their expectations, leaving something on the shelf for someone else, and to reach out to the most vulnerable. I have a basket on my porch for friends and neighbors to share items they have extras of. I then deliver those items to refugee families. It's beautiful to see on a daily basis what items are being dropped off on my porch and in my basket for those that are vulnerable among us. I encourage you to think about what you can do on a small level to assist these people that have so little. When shopping, I encourage you to leave something on the shelf for someone else. When asked these questions, is the country in danger of running out of essentials like food, toilet paper, surgical masks? And after Wednesday's earthquake frayed nerves across the Wasatch Front, what can residents expect? Paul Shred, senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, said this: while the supply chain for certain products is certainly under stress, with manufacturers struggling to keep up with demand, people's fear-based buying habits may exacerbate the problem. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, he said. If people are concerned that the shelves will become empty, they will become empty. I ask you to think about this call to action. Leave something on the shelf for someone else. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Simplify your expectations. Share your abundance with the most needy. I believe things are improving and hope that the hunker and bunker mentality is slowly turning to the tend and befriend. Tending and befriending needs to happen on a smaller level. Because of how contagious COVID-19 is, we had to limit donation drop-offs at our share house, and we've become much more creative in the ways that we collect and distribute items. Mass donations and distribution sites are contrary to recommendations to maintain social distance and limit physical contact. Instead of a giant heart to pump blood out to the refugee community in the form of diapers and toilet paper, we have asked people who follow us on our social media feed to use creative arteries to get to the most vulnerable. Tending and befriending can still be done for refugees, but it must be done on a smaller level, with the threat of COVID-19 hanging over us. We put out a call to action to our over 17,000 social media followers and gave them ideas of things to do on a smaller level to reach the most vulnerable. Here are a few of our suggestions. Reach out to any refugees you know. See how they are doing and if they need anything. Do what you can to meet their needs. If you do not have what they need, ask neighbors and friends to help. Don't go around to stores shopping for what they need. Only go if you're already going. If you know someone who works with refugees, reach out to them and ask what needs they might be aware of. This may include reaching out to refugee mentors, people who work with refugee wards and branches, refugee tutors, or any other avenues you may be aware of. Organize small groups of people to help with needs. Do not go to the stores unnecessarily or gather in small groups to serve. Reach out to refugee nonprofits and ask if they have specific needs you can meet. I'd like to reiterate, if you reach out to refugee nonprofits, ask them what their needs are. Don't assume you know what they need and collect those items without asking. This frequently happens to us, and many times it's items we cannot use or distribute easily. If you do not know of any of those avenues, I encourage you to look at what you have and take food to food banks. Their demands are high and donations are low. Look at what you may have excess of and share. Much of the time, they're helping the most vulnerable among us, and this is a great avenue to make a difference. Like I said earlier, there are many things I've learned in the last few weeks and in the last several years of running Utah Refugee Connection and filling gaps in services in the refugee community. We're fortunate to have a lot of social media followers who follow us on Serve Refugees. They are amazing in stepping up and meeting the needs that we share on our social media feed. This is a unique time for all of us. Bill Gates said this: whereas many see the corona COVID-19 virus as a great disaster, I prefer to see it as a great corrector. It is sent to remind us of the important lessons that we seem to have forgotten, and it's up to us if we will learn them or not. It is reminding us that we are all connected, and something that affects one person has an effect on another. It is reminding us that the false borders that we have put up have little value, as this virus does not need a passport. It is reminding us by oppressing us for a short time, of those in this world whose whole life is spent in oppression. My good sisters, I invite you to reach out to the most vulnerable among us. Choose to tend and befriend instead of hunker and bunker. Leave something on the shelf for someone else. Simplify your needs, assess what you have, and share. During this time, use small, creative channels to serve the most vulnerable. Help the world see women of our faith as beacons of light, and the women who can be depended on not just to meet the needs of their own members, but women who can lift the hands that hang down for the most vulnerable among us. We are great at large-scale service, but in this unique time, find smaller, more intimate avenues and be creative in finding and meeting those needs. When Jesus was on the earth, most of his acts of service were done merely with what he had available. He did not run home and plan an elaborate way to show love and kindness. He used what he had and reached out with a good and generous heart. Jesus healed a blind man with a little dirt and spit. I'm not suggesting that we heal the blind or that we should offer others our dirt and spit, but I am suggesting that we simplify the ways we offer love. Love and kindness can be shown in simple but meaningful ways. I know of your power and goodness. I invite you to do what you can to step up to the plate and love and support those along the periphery as the Savior did. I know we will make it through the coming months, but let's do it together.